Hi everyone on YouTube. I hope you're having a beautiful day. I thank you so much for following me. I thank you so much for the questions. The questions are a compass for me to figure out what content you really like and need. So today I am answering a specific question on how I made the mandala. I made a Boro Inspired sashiko with sashiko stitching piece, and this is the piece. You can see the circle in the middle, and you can see the background here. So this piece, I'm first going to talk to you a little bit how I did this, and then I'm going to actually show you with new fabrics right here in front of me. So I will walk you through it, and you can use your stash today and your extra fabrics to make your own mandala. So this mandala, I used flannel sheet for the backing. I don't have, for the base. I don't have a backing on it right now. So I used for the base, for me to lay my pieces on and sew. So I used the Boro method of laying out my pieces, and these are very large pieces, and I wanted that because I knew I was putting my mandala on top of those pieces. I wanted those to be a backdrop. And so they are a backdrop. Now, I was worried a little bit about them clashing, and they do a little bit, but you can see the difference. I used some parallel stitching, running stitches here. Here on the mandala, I used consistent stitches. I used French knots. I made sure that this was tight with sashiko stitching. And this also is on its own base. So you kind of see the thickness there, and you see a little shibori manipulation here. You can see how I used my needle to gather and make a little bit of a more shibori effect. So that is how I did this piece. This piece is on my YouTube. It's a little ways back, but it's there. So today, what we're going to do, I'm going to show you how to build. I'm not going to do any stitching because I'm just, for the sake of time and instruction, to just show you how to build. So I'm going to put this camera down. And we'll begin. This is a table mat. So I didn't do any cutting or anything to it. You see it's naturally all hemmed. Now, I have some larger pieces here because this is where I want to begin my Boro building here. So, and then I'm coming along and I'm laying down my mandala. So we'll show you that next. So I'm simply starting at the edge with my Boro building, and I'm being mindful of overlapping about 1/8 of an inch. I'm using my larger pieces. That's how I want to do it. Now you can certainly do it anyway. You can use any size pieces, but these larger pieces. And then what I do next is I would start my next row like this. Let's see if I have any larger ones. And just going along. So that's basically how I would do my Boro building. So I'll leave that there. Now, I'm putting my mandala. So let's say you have sashiko, done all your sashiko stitching. Stitch these down to make sure they're secure, because when you're working on your mandala and you're securing it to your base, you want to make sure you're able to move freely and work. So now you can see the contrast here, and I did that purposely because I want you to be able to see the Kiwandi, now on the mandala, and the question that's coming in is someone's asking the question, they want to do the layout of the pieces, I believe in a Kiwandi method, on a round tablecloth. So their tablecloth is the base. Now, so they are sewing on to their tablecloth. Now, if you want to take that tablecloth and give it a backing after, because you want your stitches secure, you just simply, before you stitch, make sure you have a backing, a piece of fabric, the same measure of your tablecloth. Because guess what? When you're done with your tablecloth, it's going to probably shrink. After all the sashiko stitching you're doing, it will shrink. Naturally, it will be pulled in, the fibers will tighten, and it'll come in about an inch. So your backing is naturally bigger, so you can either trim it to fit a nice size, or you can fold it and do a back-to-back stitching for your backing, or you can do back to front. Now with a circle, that might be a little, you have to manipulate or maybe cut a little bit on the edges to make it flow nicely going around. But probably the easiest, and what I would suggest and what I would do, which a lot of quilters are like, no, but what I would do is trim it to the size of your tablecloth after it's all sashiko stitched. But first, make sure you have that piece before you start stitching. Just it makes it a lot easier for you. So to put a backing on. So anyway, with all that said, to build your Kiwandi method. So I've got smaller pieces here, and going around the circle, all I did was simply lay the piece against the edge. Now you're like, well, that's a rectangle or square, this and that, but you see that goes fine. Now, if there is excess fabric there, clip it. You can clip it after you've done your sashiko stitching. So then the next piece, I'm overlapping, and I think the overlapping compensates a little bit for not so much excess fabric around the edges. But you'll see it here. I'm going to pin these so we can lift it after and you can see. So with Kiwandi method, you're talking about row 1, row 2, row 3 as you go towards the center. So I'm going to go straight around here. And if we run out of fabric, I will just stop and cut more, but I think I have plenty over here. And I'm just going to pin these so you can see what's going on the edges. And we will do this whole circle today because that way you'll be able to see clearly. And if you have questions after that, please bring them to me. Now, as you see I'm laying them, no worries about the how they're falling against each other. As long as you're covering your fabric, you are creating and building your Kiwandi Inspired Mandala. This piece is a little bigger than what I'm using to go around, but I'm going to leave it like that. Now you can see as I'm going around, that's not a perfectly straight line. That's okay. That's okay. The beauty of this type of method is the humbleness of it all. I'll leave that one like that size too. And you're not having to really manipulate this. They fall into place by themselves. This one. Now after we do the first row, I'm going to lift this up and show you what the edges look like and how you would trim them. And you probably have very little trimming to do. Now, there are people, there are methods, there are artists who will use the same size pieces, the exact same size, so they don't have any of the diversions going in their piece. I like the diversions, I like the variances, but if you use the same pieces, let's say, you may get more of an effect of the circle. Okay, because the eye will follow those same sizes. The eye will see your mandala much quicker. So there are different methods, and it's really basically experimenting and deciding what you really like and how you want to do this. That piece I really do want longer. Let's see. Okay. Now I went fairly quickly here. I was not worrying about manipulating these pieces too much. And you lift this up. We're going to turn this, I'm going to move this piece that is under, I'm going to take these pieces off here for now. Because I want to turn this over. Okay. These are your edges. This one's sticking out the most, and you have very little edges there, very little. So all you would do after you sew, come along and trim those. After you do your sashiko stitching, after you do the whole piece, because it will pull. Now you start your second row of Kiwandi, and you're simply going to start, you make sure you overlap, and you're going to build this straight around. If you want to turn your circle like this, so it's easier for you to work it's directly in front of you, go ahead and do that. If you want to work this way and you're working with it not moving, you may have a different design, or you may not. You may decide to put that like that, or you may decide to put that piece like this. The trick is you want to keep moving along on your second row. This is your second row. Now, this piece was way up there. So, are you going to bring this piece way up there? I'm not. For me, I'm working 1/8 of an inch above the fabric because I want to cover this space. This space is my cue. That is my cue on where to put this fabric. That is my cue. So I'm going to leave the circle. I'm not turning it, just so you can see how I would do my second row. This piece, we're going to cut it. Now, if you want a centerpiece, well, I'm going to show you at the end because I want to show you how this flows when you're using your fabrics. I'm having to cut some pieces to make sure we have enough, because I do want to finish this with you today. And I did a video on the different types of fabric that you can use. You can certainly mix them if that's what you'd like to do. That's the second row. Now we're going to continue. Again, our spaces are our cues. So, let's see. And you see these are not perfectly rectangles or squares. That's okay. if you do want them perfect, you certainly can do that, and there's many ways to do a design like that. You can do triangles, you can do circles. Okay, now I'm staying with this row here. The space, that's my cue on where to lay that next piece. Making sure, oops, when you do that, you want to make sure all your spaces are covered. See, sometimes if you think you're too high up, pull it down. That's okay to do, certainly, but you want to make sure on this side everything's covered. And that's kind of why, like, I kind of go dead center. I want this space to be centered on my piece. And that tells me immediately everything's covered. But you can certainly move it down a little bit if you feel it doesn't need to be that high or that much over. Certainly you can do that. There's no rules that say that you cannot do that. Now, you see we're getting to the center. This is the Kiwandi method. And I need to just cut a few more pieces here to get us to the end. Keeping some diversity here so you can see what I'm doing. Again, here's a space. Do I want to cover the whole space? If I don't cover the whole space, if I have a little piece like this, let's say, well, that tells me I still have that space to work with, and this space right here. So I can just cover that straight up like that. I'm still going around in my circle. And because what you want to do is try to get away from the traditional thinking of, oh my goodness, it needs to be perfectly centered. You can see that's not perfectly centered right there. Now, there may be people who can and will perfectly center it, and that's how they want it. And I'm going to show you in a second, if you do have something perfectly centered, you want it perfect like that, I'm going to show you a little trick, and it's super duper easy. Now I have this, and I have this. Let's stay with the Kiwandi method. I'm going to get a piece to cover that. And my next piece is this one. Boom, done. Now, let's say, let me make that a little smaller. Okay, let's say, so this is the Kiwandi method. Let's say you want something centered in the middle of this. You want to do your Kiwandi method, but you want something centered because you feel it's pretty, and that's how you're rolling on this piece. Let's see here. I have a butterfly. I'll use the sun. Here's the sun. So what I would do is do the entire piece, let it flow the way it's flowing. If you're using scraps and you're using a creative method, just let it flow the way you want it, the way it's going to. It's taking life of a life of its own on. So this is the center, and let's say I want this sun to be the center. I'm going to do the whole piece, and I'm just going to place that in the center and then sew that on. That's a way to get something centered. Now, or you can take your time here and you can center it with matched pieces. Will give you that center also. So I hope that helps. And if you have any other questions, let me know. You know, beginning your project and practicing it is the most phenomenal. It just, you will learn so much just stitching. It's amazing because you're seeing how the fabric reacts to the stitching. You're seeing how the design melds with the stitching. The sashiko and the visible stitching in itself is creating your Boro piece. So I hope you have a beautiful day. I hope that that helped. If you have more questions, you need more clarification, certainly ask me and let me know. I will be working on a mandala in a little more detail of my own and stitching it. So that will be a process of a whole week. But today I wanted to get this out to answer that question so you can get started on your beautiful mandala Boro Inspired piece. So you have a beautiful day.